The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful, contented silence of two people sleeping in, but a hollow, empty silence that crawls under your skin. The sunlight was streaming through the cheap hotel blinds, striping the rumpled sheets of the bed. My wedding band, a simple gold ring, felt heavy and foreign on my finger. Hers was gone, and so was she. I sat up, my heart beginning a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. "Lina!" I called out, my voice thick with sleep. The only answer was the distant hum of traffic from the streets of Manila. Her suitcase, the one she'd packed so meticulously the day before with her few worldly possessions, was gone. Her wedding dress, a simple white garment that had made her look like an angel, was gone. The envelope of cash I'd withdrawn for our honeymoon, $5,000 was also gone. I remember stumbling out of bed, my legs unsteady, and checking the bathroom. It was empty. The small bottle of jasmine-scented lotion she loved was gone. The only thing she'd left behind was a single, long black hair on the pillow next to mine. I stood in the middle of that silent hotel room for what felt like an eternity, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying, soul-crushing certainty. We had been married for less than 24 hours, and my wife had vanished without a trace. This is the story of how I found love again in my 50s and how that love tried to destroy me. It's a story I have to tell, so that maybe, just maybe, it won't happen to someone else. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal or the cold dread of realising everything you believed in was a lie, then stick around. This story is for you. And if you want to hear more true stories of survival and the dark side of human nature, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. You won't want to miss what comes next. My name is Robert Miller. When this story began, I was 52 years old, living in a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon. My life was, for lack of a better word, beige. It was a landscape of muted colours, predictable routines, and a profound, gnawing loneliness that had settled deep in my bones. 3 years prior, I'd lost my wife Sarah to cancer. We had been married for 25 years. She was my high school sweetheart, my best friend, the entire vibrant spectrum of my world. Her passing didn't just leave a hole in my life, it felt like it scooped out the very foundation of who I was. I worked as a systems analyst for a mid-sized logistics company, a job I'd had for nearly 2 decades. I was good at it, respected. But it was a world of data and code, of logic and predictable outcomes. My days were a carbon copy of the one before. Wake up at 6:30, brew the same dark roast coffee, drive the same route to an office that smelled of stale air and photocopier toner, work for 8 hours, drive home, and then face the crushing silence of an empty house. My son Mark was grown and lived in California with his own family. We spoke on holidays and birthdays, our conversations polite but distant. He'd tried to get me to move closer after his mum died, but I couldn't leave the house I'd built with Sarah. Every corner held a memory, every creak in the floorboards was a ghost of her laughter. I existed, but I wasn't living. I'd watch couples walking in the park, holding hands, and a pang of something bitter and sharp would hit my chest. I missed the simple things, the warmth of someone next to me in bed, the easy banter over dinner, the shared jokes that needed no explanation. I was a man adrift on a grey sea with no land in sight. It was that desperation, that profound ache for connection, that led me to the internet. I wasn't looking for a fling. I was looking for a lighthouse. I wanted to feel seen again. I wanted to feel something, anything, other than the dull, constant ache of grief. I created a profile on an international dating site, something I never in a million years thought I would do. I was awkward, my profile description clumsy. I uploaded a picture of me from a few years back, one where I was smiling a genuine smile, a picture Sarah had taken. I felt a fool, a lonely old man casting a message in a bottle into the vast digital ocean. I had no idea that a shark was about to answer my call. Her name was Lina. Her profile picture showed a woman with sparkling dark eyes, a radiant smile, and hair as black as a raven's wing. She was 28 years old, from a small province in the Philippines. Her bio said she was a family-oriented woman who valued honesty and was looking for a serious, lifelong partner to build a future with. She looked so full of life, so vibrant. It was everything my world was not. When she messaged me first, my heart did a little flip I hadn't felt in years. Her English was a little broken, but her messages were sweet, filled with compliments and genuine curiosity about my life. She called me handsome, kind, a gentleman. She said she could see the goodness in my eyes. I was starved for that kind of warmth, and I drank it in like a man dying of thirst. We quickly moved from the dating site to a messaging app and then to video calls. Those calls became the anchor of my day. I'd rush home from work, my heart thumping with anticipation. Seeing her face on my screen was like a burst of sunlight in my grey world. She would listen, really listen, as I talked about my day, about Sarah, about my loneliness. She would cry with me when I shared my grief, her empathy feeling so real, so profound. She told me about her life, a life of struggle, she said. She was the eldest of 5 siblings, working a low-paying job in a factory to support her entire family. She spoke of her sick mother who needed medicine, of her youngest brother who was smart but couldn't afford to go to school. She painted a picture of a dutiful, selfless daughter, trapped by circumstance but full of dreams. Her dream, she said, was to find a good man who would love her and help her give her family a better life. I wasn't just a potential partner, I was a potential saviour. And God help me, I wanted to be. The romantic connection was immediate and intense. She would send me messages in the morning saying, "Good morning, my king," and late at night before she went to sleep, "I will be dreaming of you, my love." She told me she loved me within 3 weeks. It felt fast, dizzyingly fast, but it also felt right. I was falling, hard and fast, for a woman half my age, halfway around the world. I was falling in love with the idea of her, with the way she made me feel, needed, desired, powerful and alive. I was building a fantasy, and she was providing all the materials. After 2 months of constant communication, I knew I had to meet her. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I booked a flight to Manila, a 10-day trip that I told myself would either confirm everything I felt or bring me crashing back to reality. When I saw her at the airport, she was even more beautiful in person. She ran into my arms, and holding her felt like coming home. The first few days were a blur of perfect storybook romance. She took me to see the sights, we walked hand in hand along the bay, and she looked at me with an adoration that melted away all my insecurities. She was attentive, affectionate, and everything I'd ever dreamed of. She introduced me to her family in their small, modest home. Her mother, frail and coughing, gave me a weak but grateful smile. Her father, a quiet man, shook my hand firmly. Her younger siblings looked at me with wide, curious eyes. They treated me like royalty, serving me the best food, telling me over and over how lucky Lina was to have found such a good man. It felt like I was being welcomed into a new life. But even in this haze of happiness, there were little things, tiny discordant notes in a beautiful symphony. During a family dinner, I overheard one of her cousins whisper something to another in Tagalog, followed by the words, "the other American." When I asked Lina about it later, she brushed it off, saying they were just surprised she had found a foreigner, that it was a silly joke. I wanted to believe her, so I did. Another time, we were out shopping, and she pointed to an expensive handbag. When I hesitated, her sunny disposition clouded over for just a second, a flicker of something cold and calculating in her eyes, before the warm smile returned. She quickly apologised, saying she didn't mean to be greedy, that she was just not used to seeing such nice things. Again, I pushed the doubt away. These were just cultural differences, I told myself. My own anxieties, my own baggage from a life of caution. She was a young woman from a poor background. Of course she would be excited by a different life. I was letting my middle-aged cynicism poison something pure and beautiful. I was so desperate for the fantasy to be real that I willingly ignored the cracks that were starting to appear in its foundation. The biggest red flag was the talk of marriage. It came up on the 3rd day. She told me with tears in her eyes that she couldn't be with a man intimately unless they were married. It was against her values, her religion. She wanted to be my wife, to belong to me completely. It was a whirlwind. We had only just met in person. But here was this beautiful woman offering me everything I'd been missing: a wife, a family, a new purpose. Standing there with her holding my hand and looking up at me with those big, hopeful eyes, saying no felt impossible. It felt like rejecting life itself. So I said yes. The moment I agreed to marry her, the dynamic shifted. It was subtle at first, but the financial requests began to flow more freely, wrapped in the language of our shared future. The first major one was for her mother's medical treatments. She called me late one night, sobbing. Her mother had taken a turn for the worse, she said, and needed to be admitted to a private hospital. The public ones were death traps. The bill was astronomical, over $2,000. She hated to ask, she was so ashamed, but it was a matter of life and death. My heart went out to her. Of course I would help. It was for my future mother-in-law. I wired the money without a second thought, feeling a surge of pride at being able to provide, to be her hero. A week later, it was for her brother's college tuition. He was so smart, she said, and this was his one chance to escape a life of poverty. Another $1,000. Then came the wedding expenses. She wanted a proper ceremony, nothing lavish, but something respectable to honour her family. There was the dress, the venue, the food, the rings. Each item came with a price tag and a story about family honour or tradition. I was hemorrhaging money, sending thousands of dollars every couple of weeks through wire transfers. When I would gently question the mounting costs, she would grow quiet, her voice filled with hurt. "I thought you loved me," she'd say. "I thought you wanted to be my husband. If it is too much, I understand. I will just tell my family we have to cancel." The emotional manipulation was masterful. It wasn't a demand. It was a test of my love, my commitment. And I was terrified of failing that test. The alternative was returning to my silent, grey life in Oregon, and that was a prospect I couldn't bear. So I paid. I dipped into my savings, the nest egg Sarah and I had carefully built over decades. I told myself it was an investment in my happiness, in our future. I was buying a new life. I was so caught up in the emotional high she provided that I became blind to the financial reality. My entire world began to revolve around her. My work felt like just a means to earn money for her. My friends who had started to voice concerns, were pushed away. What did they know of a love like this? They were cynical. They couldn't understand the depth of our connection. I was living in a bubble of my own making, inflated by her constant praise and affection. I was completely dependent on her emotionally. Her "Good morning, my king" texts were the fuel that got me out of bed. Her late-night calls were the only thing that kept the crushing loneliness at bay. She was my drug, and I was a willing addict, ignoring the devastating cost of my habit. I flew back to the Philippines a month later for the wedding. It was a small, hurried affair at a local municipal hall. Her family was there, all smiles and congratulations. She looked breathtaking in her simple white dress. As I slid the ring onto her finger and the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, a wave of pure, unadulterated happiness washed over me. I had done it. I had found love again. I had a wife, a family, a future. The loneliness was gone, banished forever. That night in our hotel room was everything I had dreamed of. She was passionate and loving, whispering promises of our new life together in America. She told me she would be the best wife a man could ask for. I fell asleep feeling like the luckiest man on earth. And then I woke up to the silence. After the initial panic, a cold, sickening dread began to seep into my veins. I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. I messaged her. No reply. The green online status that had been a constant presence for months was gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of the situation crashing down on me like a tsunami. The missing suitcase, the missing money, the missing woman. I was a fool, a 52-year-old fool who had been played with surgical precision. The grief was immediate and overwhelming, a physical pain in my chest that was sharper and more brutal than anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't just about the money, it was the complete and utter demolition of my reality. The love, the connection, the shared future, It had all been a lie. A meticulously crafted performance designed for one purpose: to drain me of my savings. In a daze, I started digging. I don't know what I was looking for. Proof, maybe. Something to make the nightmare real. I remembered the name of the cousin I'd heard whispering at dinner. I went onto social media and searched for her, scrolling through her public photos. And there it was. A picture from 6 months prior. It was Lina, smiling that same radiant smile. She was on a beach, her arm around another man, an older white man just like me. Her family was there too, surrounding the happy couple. The caption, translated by the app, read, "Congratulations to my cousin and her new husband David. Welcome to the family." There were other pictures. Lina with another husband from Australia from a year ago. Lina with a fiancé from Germany. It was a gallery of her conquests. Each picture was a stake through my heart. She wasn't just a scammer, she was a professional. This was her job. Her family wasn't just complicit, they were her business partners. The sick mother, the brother's tuition, the whirlwind romance, it was all a script. And I had played my part perfectly. The shame was suffocating. I had betrayed the memory of Sarah. I had thrown away my financial security. I had made a mockery of my own loneliness. Sitting in that empty hotel room, a world away from home, I felt like my life was over. The story you just heard is a nightmare that became my reality. If you're finding value in this story, or if it resonates with you, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the conclusion. And I have to ask, have you or anyone you know ever experienced a betrayal like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward healing. The first thing I did was go to her family's home. I needed a confrontation. I needed to see the look on their faces when they couldn't lie anymore. I took a taxi to their small house, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and dread. Her father answered the door. When he saw me, his previously warm expression turned to stone. I asked him where Lina was. He just shrugged, feigning ignorance. "She is a grown woman," he said in broken English. "She does what she wants." Her mother appeared behind him, her cough miraculously gone. She looked at me not with sympathy but with cold contempt. The whole family gathered, no longer the welcoming, grateful people I had met, but a hostile, defensive wall. They denied everything. They denied knowing about the money, about her disappearance. They claimed I must have done something to scare her away. They were turning it on me. I was losing my mind, shouting, my voice cracking with desperation. It was useless. They were a united front of practiced liars. Defeated, I returned to my hotel, and that's when the message came. It was from a new, unknown number, but I knew it was her. The message wasn't an apology, it was a threat. It was a photo of me taken in our hotel room in a compromising position, a photo I didn't even know she had taken. The text that followed was chillingly simple. $10,000, or this goes to your son and your boss. My blood ran cold. The woman I had called my wife, the woman I had poured my heart out to, was now blackmailing me. The scam wasn't over. It had just entered a new, more vicious phase. My control was gone. I was completely at her mercy. For the next 48 hours, I was trapped in a prison of fear and shame. I didn't leave the hotel room. I barely ate. I just stared at my phone, at that picture, imagining it appearing on my son's screen or in the inbox of my HR department. I could see my life unravelling. The humiliation, the loss of my job, the look of disgust and pity on my son's face. She had me. She knew my deepest fear wasn't losing money. It was losing my dignity, my reputation, the life I had so carefully built. She sent more messages, each one turning the screw a little tighter. She sent screenshots of my son's social media profile, of my company's website. She was showing me she had done her research, that her threats were not idle. I felt a suffocating pressure, a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I was no longer a victim of a romance scam, I was a hostage. All the love I'd felt for her had curdled into something toxic and terrifying. I saw her not as the sweet girl from the Philippines, but as a monster, a predator who had expertly targeted my weaknesses and was now poised to destroy me completely. I thought about just paying her, wiring the $10,000 and praying she would disappear from my life forever. It felt like the only way out, the only way to contain the damage. But I knew deep down that it wouldn't be the end. It would only be the beginning. For 3 days, I was paralysed. I was a ghost haunting a hotel room in Manila, thousands of miles from everything I knew. I scrolled through old pictures of Sarah on my phone, her smiling face a painful reminder of what real love looked like. I remembered her strength during her illness, her refusal to ever see herself as a victim. She fought with a grace and courage that I felt I had completely lost. What would she think of me now? A broken, foolish old man being tormented by a woman young enough to be his daughter. The shame was a physical weight. But then something inside me shifted. It started as a tiny spark of anger in the vast darkness of my fear and self-pity. This wasn't me. I was not a weak man. I had built a life, raised a family, endured the most profound loss imaginable, and I had survived. I would not let this person, this criminal, break me. The memory of Sarah's courage became my own. I decided I was not going to pay the blackmail. I was not going to be her victim anymore. I was going to fight back. It was a terrifying decision because it meant accepting that the worst could happen. The photos could be released. I could be humiliated. But the alternative, living the rest of my life as a hostage, always looking over my shoulder, financially and emotionally bled dry by this phantom, was a fate worse than public shame. My first call was to the US Embassy in Manila. The voice on the other end of the line was professional, calm, but also weary. He had heard stories like mine 100 times before. He gave me a list of resources, advised me to file a police report, and warned me that recovering the money or bringing her to justice would be nearly impossible. It wasn't the heroic intervention I had hoped for, but it was a step. It was an admission that this was real, a crime had been committed against me. Next, I went to the local police. Filing the report was a humiliating, hours-long ordeal. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. Another old foreigner, another young Filipina, another story of love and money gone wrong. But I did it. I put every detail on the record. I gave them her name, her family's address, copies of the wire transfers, the threatening messages. Finally, I found an online support group for victims of romance scams. Reading other people's stories was like opening a window in my prison. Men and women from all over the world, of all ages, had fallen into the same trap. Smart people, successful people. They had been targeted not because they were stupid, but because they were lonely, because they were human. For the first time, the crushing weight of my shame began to lift. I wasn't just a fool, I was a victim of a sophisticated psychological crime. Making those calls, filing that report, reaching out for help, it was my declaration of war. I was taking back control. I had no idea if I would win, but I knew with absolute certainty that I would no longer be a pawn in her game. I was done running. I was ready to face the consequences, whatever they may be. The legal battle was exactly what the man at the embassy predicted, a frustrating, fruitless exercise in bureaucracy. The local police investigation went nowhere. The family had moved. The phone numbers were disconnected. Lina, or whatever her real name was, had vanished like a ghost. The threats stopped as soon as she realised I'd gone to the authorities. She never released the photos. Her power was in the threat, in the secrecy and shame. Once I brought it into the light, her power over me evaporated. I flew back to Oregon a week later, a changed man. The world didn't look the same. The quiet beige of my old life now seemed like a safe harbour, a peaceful sanctuary I had foolishly abandoned. But I couldn't just slip back into it. The emotional fallout was immense. I was plagued by nightmares. I trusted no one. Every friendly gesture from a stranger felt like a potential manipulation. The betrayal had left deep scars on my psyche. I had to face the man in the mirror, the man who had been so easily deceived. I had to confront the profound loneliness and desperation that had made me such an easy target. That was the hardest part. It wasn't about her being a monster, it was about me understanding the void inside myself she had so expertly filled. I started seeing a therapist, something I never would have considered before. Talking about it, unpacking the layers of grief, loneliness and naivety was painful but necessary work. I learned to forgive myself. I learned that my desire for connection wasn't a weakness, it was a human need. My mistake was not in seeking love, but in being so blinded by my own fantasy that I ignored all the signs that the love I'd found wasn't real. The most important step in my healing was reconnecting with my son Mark. I flew to California and I told him everything. The whole sordid, embarrassing story. I didn't spare a single detail. I expected judgment, or at least an "I told you so." Instead, he listened patiently, and when I was done, he just looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you, Dad." In that moment, the final wall of shame around my heart crumbled. He didn't see a fool. He saw his father in pain. Our relationship began to heal. We started talking more, not just about superficial things, but about life, about loss, about his mother. The crisis had, in a strange and painful way, brought us closer than we had been in years. The road to recovery was long. It wasn't a straight line. There were days when the anger and bitterness would surge back. But slowly, painstakingly, I began to rebuild my life, not on a fantasy, but on a foundation of self-awareness and hard-won truth. It has been 5 years now since I woke up in that silent hotel room in Manila. I am 57 years old. I still live in the same house, but it doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels like home. I am still a systems analyst, but my work is no longer my entire life. I've reconnected with old friends. I spend my weekends hiking the beautiful trails of Oregon, finding solace in the quiet majesty of nature. I visit my son and my grandchildren every few months. I am a part of their lives again, a real part, not a distant voice on the phone. I never heard from Lina again. Sometimes I wonder what happened to her, if she's still out there, weaving her web for another lonely soul. I hope for her own sake that she found a different path. But I no longer waste my energy on anger towards her. My focus is on my own life, on the peace I have fought so hard to find. I haven't tried dating again. Maybe I will someday, maybe I won't. I've learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely. I have found a sense of contentment within myself that I never thought possible. I am no longer a man adrift. I have found my own shore. I decided to share this story not for pity and not for revenge. I share it as a cautionary tale, yes, but more than that, as a message of hope. Betrayal can feel like the end of the world. It can shatter your trust in others and even worse, in yourself. But it does not have to be the end of your story. You can survive it. You can learn from it. You can emerge from the wreckage not broken, but stronger, wiser, and with a deeper understanding of who you are. The scars will remain, but they become a part of your map, a testament to the journey you have endured. If you are listening to this and you are in a dark place, if you feel lost or broken by someone else's deception, please know this: you are not alone and you have the strength within you to rebuild. Your life is still your own. The final chapter has not yet been written. Thank you for listening to my story. It's important that these experiences are shared, that we shed light on the darkness so that others might not have to walk through it. If my journey has resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. Leave a comment below and share your own insights or experiences. Together, by sharing our stories, we can help each other heal and move forward. Stay safe and be kind to yourselves.